I feel like I am living my dream life, but it is a dream that is very different from what I had anticipated. When I was 20 years old, I was diagnosed with a rare medical condition that scared my family and I. And in response, I quit school, and I backpacked Central and South America to live life with urgency. I had no plans. Somewhere along the way, I wanted to make a difference, but I didn't know how. I don't believe in going into another community and another culture and saying, I know what you need. I know how I can help you, because I had no idea. Who am I to impose those kinds of values on someone else? It is the community members themselves who know more than anyone what they need. My journey led me to the Sacred Valley of Peru, where I ended up working with the indigenous weavers of the Andean Mountains. Several months into my stay, I took a many-hour hike to a tiny village called Calcanca, which at the time had no roads or no amenities near it. And that's where I started beginning to learn the language of Quechua, which is the Andean language, the oral language of the indigenous peoples of the Andes. And I started beginning to ask how to say the typical questions, hi, how are you, what's your name, what time is it? But when I got to what time is it, I received no response. The woman told me that they have no word for hour. She said, I wake up when the sun wakes up. I eat when my stomach growls. I go to sleep when the sun goes to sleep. Why would I need something artificial to tell me how to live my life? Fair enough. I realized that we in Canada live our lives so much based on deadlines and time limits and the clock. We don't live our lives, we don't feel success because of the journey that we're on, but instead because of the things we cross off our checklist. I don't enjoy writing my exams, I enjoy crossing them off afterwards. I don't feel success when I'm in the middle of a work assignment. I only feel success once it's been published. The women in the Andean Mountains live their lives based on process, not product. Their husbands in the region farm. And while they farm, the women weave. And this weaving tradition, both the weaving tradition and the farming tradition, have been passed down generation after generation orally. And at the end of the day, every day, they pack up their looms, only to open them up again and restart the next morning. The beauty of the Quechua textile tradition lies in its process. Nestled within these products are natural fibers made from alpaca and sheep that are hand-spun and hand-sheared. Natural dyes that are made from hundreds of plants in the region. And the iconography that is embedded within these textiles tells the story of these women's histories in a way that words have failed to express. So in a region where men run the politics, and in a world where our written history is not that of indigenous peoples, these weavings give these women voice. Art has given voice to their history, to their own stories. And it has become their only written history book for their culture, a documentation of their stories, their words, their values, their beliefs. Now, the textile tradition, even though it has survived centuries, is facing its greatest challenge, that of the globalized capitalist marketplace. Now there are machine-made synthetic knockoffs of their authentic goods in the market, and they cannot compete. They cannot sell their own authentic products for a fair trade price, for a price that embeds the knowledge, the time, the skills, the history that is needed to keep this art alive. For a textile that would take a woman about 3 weeks to weave, not including the shearing, dyeing, spinning of the wool, nor the 2 days that it would take to hike to that market, would sell for about $40 Canadian in the market if she's lucky. She is not weaving for the sake of the product. She's not weaving so that she can give that product to a tourist, to put it in the hands of a tourist for a quick monetary exchange. No, she's weaving to keep the process alive for herself, for her culture, for her grandmothers and great-grandmothers. They're worried that this textile tradition is disappearing. And it's just one of many side effects of the unsustainable tourism and development that's going on in the region without their permission. So when they asked me for help, I said yes. I trusted in the process, despite not knowing what would unfold. They were worried that they had to choose between keeping their culture alive and developing economically, but that they could not have both. So they asked me to help figure out a way so that they no longer had to choose. I started Mosqoy, which means dream in Quechua, and which quickly turned into my life's work. And this is an international charitable organization that works to combat the adverse effects of the tourism and development in the area. And it does so by providing economic and educational opportunities for communities in the region while still nurturing their traditional threatened indigenous culture. Mosqoy values process as much as it values product. We're now 8.5 years old, and we've sent over 60 students to university and worked with over 150 weavers. But more important than that, we've figured out what works and what doesn't work. We've shared tears, stories, anniversaries with weavers. We've had stimulating conversations with our students about what they recommend for how we can improve next year, and so we do. I find that education nowadays thinks so much about the future. What do you want to be when you grow up? What should the education system look like? And yet, we can learn so much from our past, so much from our own stories, our own histories. I grew up on this very stage. I had my very first public performances about 15 years ago when this stage was first built. I was fortunate to be raised by a group of teachers who believed in process, who believed enough in creativity to allow me to push myself and challenge myself so that I could explore the creativity that lies in chaos. They taught me that challenge is not a negative part of life, but instead an opportunity for choice and for growth. Educators of the world cannot control what their students are going to do with their degrees. They cannot control who their students will become, but they can control the process. They can control the tools that they give their students. They can control the patterns that their students start learning and therefore will replicate in the future. Our human society has a desire to control. We have a desire to order the chaos that surrounds us. We have to, because in our education system, in our NGOs, those who are evaluating us do so on our products. They do so on our outputs. But what happens when the process goes awry? What happens? Is there nothing that we can learn in those processes too? Is there no value in those? Mosqoy has tried a lot of projects, many of which have failed according to international development standards because we don't have substantial quantitative outputs for those projects, or because we had to adapt them and change them according to the community's changing needs. But those projects are actually our most successful processes because we learned more about the Quechua culture, we learned more about facilitation, about conflict resolution than our many projects that succeeded. Ecology is based on the theory that everything is a system. So a pelican, for example, is a whole within itself, but it's also a part of the larger whole of its whole species. And that whole species is a part of its entire coastal ecosystem. And every system, whether an individual, a community, a species, an ecosystem, has a certain pattern of growth. And that pattern of growth is what evolution's all about. So a system is stable until something interrupts it, challenges it, and at that moment, it then goes into a bifurcation point or a tipping point. And in this point is its moment of chaos. In that moment of chaos is when a system has only one of two choices. It can either collapse, go extinct, or it can transcend to a new level of reorganization and restability. And that pattern of growth continues over and over again as systems grow and evolve. We too are systems. We too have challenges that send us into chaos. But what's exciting about that chaos point is that that is the moment where we have the most potential for creativity. Without chaos, we are too stable to reorganize. We are too inflexible to adapt and change. And so in this moment of chaos is when one person or one event can have incredible influence on someone's future, on someone's life. When one person can become a catalyst and influence someone's future for the better or for the worse. So educators can try to find that chaos, and rather than quell it out of fear, they can guide it towards transcendence, guide it up towards a reorganization, towards a better future. We need to relinquish just enough control to be able to teach our children resilience, to teach them the gift and the beauty of adaptability and change. In Kalkanka, I later learned that there is such a thing for telling time, but it's a bit different. In Kalkanka, there is, when they're trying to plan a weaving meeting and they want a group meeting for their association, they raise a flag near the elementary school. And Kalkanka is situated at the base of a mountain in a valley surrounded by other mountains. And so children throughout the day will run up to the top of the mountains from their own communities and look down to see if the flag has been raised. And once it has, they'll go back to their communities and tell everybody that the flag's been raised. Everyone will gather all of their things and hike up to the summit of the mountain to meet at the base of the flag. Sometimes it takes hours for everyone to convene. I've waited 2 days for a meeting before, but it starts when it's time to begin. Here, we cannot live without a clock. We would miss deadlines, we would fail, we would get fired. But we can learn a little bit about that process. We can honor the journey a little more than what we have. And we can think about what is that inevitable checklist that we're shooting for. It certainly is not death that will finally make us feel like we've been successful at life, I hope. And so if it's not, if life is not to be crossed off, then success must be life itself. So my call to you is this: whether you're an executive director of a charity, whether you are an educator for our future generation, a mother, a prime minister, let us rebel just a bit. Let us spend one day without looking at our to-do lists. Let us honor the journey a little bit more and honor our past and our ancestors' past. Vulnerability, sensitivity is not a weakness. It is a strength that allows people to be resilient and adapt to challenge. So let us take a leap of faith into that abyss of chaos, trusting in the process, and knowing that if we fail, we teach others, and recognizing that that is our part, our contribution within the larger system. And if we don't try, then we have not given ourselves the opportunity, the chaos, the vulnerability needed to create something unknown, to create something that otherwise is impossible. Thank you.